Hey, welcome back, Attack. I'm Skyline Shore, and today we're going to be doing a little video, a little rant style first impression review of my personal impressions on a game called Skyforge. It's a new MMO by the Aelion team. This is the team that made Allions Online. It was actually a really good game. I had a lot of fun with it, and I think they do free-to-play right, and I think overall they have a lot of really creative ideas, and I was actually really excited getting into this. So my bias is that coming into this game, I was really enthusiastic about it. I thought it had a really interesting idea, concept. You know, the whole idea is that you are somebody who has become immortal, and now you are aiming to become a god. So everybody that is playing is an immortal, and you have these special powers, and you have these different classes, and then the whole aesthetic and the themality of the game seems like it kind of matches the art style of the more modern Final Fantasies. You have like this mix of high fantasy, but it's not traditional in any sense. You know, it's very technological, and yes, very reminiscent of Final Fantasy series, maybe more appropriately towards Final Fantasy 13. But that's pretty much the art style. That is pretty much where this game is coming from and where I'm coming from. You know, I was excited for this game. I wanted to see what kind of mechanics that we were going to have, what kind of world I was going to be exploring, and what kind of story that there would be. Now, I normally don't have high hopes for MMORPGs, despite RPG being in the name. Generally, MMOs are really just about stats, grinding, and then the endgame raids, maybe some PvP. Skyforge is supposed to have a focus on PvP as well as endgame content, and I was hoping that it was going to be challenging and everything. Now, I haven't done any of that. I have not done PvP yet, and I have not done endgame content. This is going to be a raw first impression. Like I said, there's going to be a rant, a very opinion-based video. But I really, you know, I liked my first impressions on this game, and I wanted to talk about the story aspect, because when you start this game, you really don't feel, it doesn't feel like an MMO. It really feels like an RPG. It really feels like an action RPG, and I feel like this game more closely is defined as an action RPG than an MMO, because all these different dungeons are just that. They're just instances. The whole game is instances. They're not connected to really open worlds or anything like that. Now, there are some larger areas in the game, but you don't get access to that until a while into the game. You actually, for like the first couple hours of your game, you're just running through instances, and this is kind of reminiscent to a game like Dragon Nest or Vindictus, or, you know, action RPGs, where you have these hub towns and you see other players and stuff like that, and then you go onto these runs, these linear missions, or these dungeons, and you go and play them. So that's the kind of game that this is. If you are comfortable with games like Path of Exile, Drakensang, Warframe, if you're comfortable with games like that, and like I said, Dragon Nest, then you're probably gonna like this game a lot. Now, if you are looking for something more of a traditional MMO, this is not the same. This is a very heavily instance-based game. Now, there's some good, there's some bad with that, and personally, I was kind of let down. You know, I wanted at least a little bit more to the hub cities, but the truth is that the hub cities are really just like single rooms. They're very, very small. They're not full of life whatsoever. There's really not too much to these hub areas. I guess you just call them areas, little hub zones. They're not even hub cities in any sense. So it's a little bit, I think, tragic. I would have liked more, but really in the end, this game is really focused on its instance gameplay. It's going to probably have a huge focus on PvP now that I actually see the instance gameplay. I think the PvP could be really fun, and of course we're going to talk about the mechanics, but I just want to keep talking about the story real quick, because the story is really good. You know, when you start in the game, this whole instance-based gameplay is actually really good for the story, because you actually have these nice little cinematics, you have voice acting, and I do think that the voice acting will be changed, because some voice actors were obviously professional and really good, but then you have obvious filler. I'm really hoping it's filler, because some of these voice actors were just really, really awful. It sounded like a member of the team was just reading the lines, and I'm almost certain that's what the case is. So later on, I think we're going to get some really good voice acting. Now, the storytelling is actually really, really similar to Star Wars: The Old Republic. If you played that game and you actually liked the story, the linear progression, and that's how you just, I don't know, it kind of feels like a console game, you know? You just kind of run through a story, a little campaign, and you have fun doing it. That's what it feels like. Now, normally MMOs have tons and tons of little tiny quests, and you have to do tons of reading. This game's not like that, you know? It's very simple, it's very to the point, you have really good voice acting to deliver these lines, and it feels really nice. It introduces you to the world nicely, and I think there's an interesting story there. I haven't quite delved all the way into it, but it seems pretty interesting. Yeah, but other than that, it doesn't seem like we're going to have choices in the dialogue. Now, right now, we just have one choice, you know, to continue the dialogue. But it seems like there might be options later on to actually have a choice dialogue if you want to go left or right, stuff like that. I would like to see that in this game, but I'm just assuming that that's something that we could do. Enough about the story, let's talk about the mechanics. Are the mechanics explained in the story? Not really. You just kind of go up to this dude and he says, hey, you can change classes at any time. Hey, you can use all these abilities. It's very weird. You just kind of get thrown into the game. thematically. So if you're trying to RP, I really don't think this is the game for you. This game is extremely arcade, absolutely arcade. And for those who like that, who like just numbers flying on the screen, who like just getting into the action very quickly, then that's for you. So it's pretty cool that they have like this linear story, but at the same time, it's also arcade. It's kind of a weird feel, honestly, to me. But when you do get into the game, and if you understand this type of gameplay, it is going to be a little bit grind-based, where you are going to be running through the same dungeons in the same areas over and over again. Yeah, like I said, like any other action RPG, like Warframe, Dragon Quest Vindictus, these games, it's going to be kind of similar to that. But yes, you can change your class at any time. They level up independently. So if you want to go and play with a lower level player, you just go switch to a class that you haven't really leveled up, and you go and play with them then. Even at a low level, there's still a nice level of mechanics with these different characters. There's a lot of mobility, which is really cool, even though it's not true action combat. Now, this is probably where the chunk of the video is definitely going to come from. Me talking about the physics of the gameplay, the game feel here, the mechanics of the gameplay. I really enjoy the planning that they have with some of these dungeons, some of these areas. There's even environmental effects where you can go and activate, I don't know, like some electricity, and then I'll go shock a monster over there if you lure them into a certain spot. But for the most part, it's really all just kind of gimmicky. And in the end, most of the gameplay is really just about you spamming your mouse and spamming 1 through 3 or whatever, and that's pretty much it. You do have a energy resource bar. I say energy instead of mana because it acts more like energy. It depletes very quickly, but it also replenishes very quickly. It almost works like rage because you get it very fast by getting hit and also hitting people. So gameplay overall is just very fast, very furious. But what about the physics? You know, if you play games like Vindictus, if you play games like Dragon Nest, those games, if you use like even a basic attack, monsters will go flying across the screen. It feels like Dynasty Warriors. It's really impactful, really fun gameplay, and you have huge abilities. This game, it's toned down a little bit. Actually, physically, it's toned down a lot of it. Your basic attacks aren't really just going to knock around monsters. You do have really cool big abilities. There is a lot of CC abilities. You can summon like giant ice pillars, to frost novas from the sky. You can spin around in a firestorm, berserker style, well, the berserker class. There's a lot of big abilities between the different classes, but any one class is not going to have a huge assortment of abilities like we see in Dragon Nest or Guild Wars 2 or World of Warcraft. Honestly, it's just very toned down, and it really feels like an action RPG where you have a limited skill set, you have a limited impact, and it's really all about your team strategy, your team synergy, and how you use your abilities at certain times during fights and throughout the whole dungeon, during these boss fights and these different encounters, so that you guys can complete it and also, you know, have fun. It's fun. But if you're just a solo player, I think it is doable, and it is kind of fun, but you're not going to get like a Dark Soulsian feel from this game. Yeah, there are skill shots that you need to avoid, but it's really not that complicated, it's not that advanced, it's nothing like you expect in a console game, and yet the game is trying to make you feel like it is a console game because it is very single player oriented, or it's very small group oriented with these instances. Now, the game's not easy. My first run through, and I am a Dark Souls veteran, and I play every other MMO, so I was a little bit jarred that this game was actually a little bit difficult. I had trouble on a couple bosses. So as a first impression, this is giving me a lot of hope that the endgame will actually be complicated, that it'll have depth, that it's going to be difficult, it's going to be a challenge for a team. And I really enjoy the resource system. Now, I kind of touched on it. I said it's kind of like energy, it's kind of like rage, and this is really important. This resource system makes it to where that you aren't really effective unless you're actually doing things. Okay, so for instance, you need to be a tank, okay, but you're not going to get energy if you're just sitting around or running around. You need to actually be actively hitting them so that you can get your resource bar up, so that you can continuously use your shields, so that you can continuously use your CC, so that you can continuously use your abilities, so that you can stay in the fight and that you are actually useful. So you need to actually be doing things. In a lot of other games, you are rewarded by just running around, doing nothing, waiting for your mana to replenish, reset monsters or mobs after you kill half of them. Now, this game's a little bit different. It's more like you're kind of all-inning. But once you realize this fact, because the monsters do also, whenever you chip away damage, they do just launch out health orbs, which is a little bit ridiculous. I think it becomes a little bit dumb, because then you know how safe you are. The more you attack, the more you get healed, and it just becomes a little bit redundant, you know, because then there's all these huge attacks, and yeah, you do still have to watch out for the huge attacks, but for the most part, it's like, get out of the way, and just keep whack-a-moling. It basically turns into a standstill game where you wait for skill shots and just move out of the way. And it's really easy to move out of the way with the dash system in this game. It's kind of like rolling, like in Neverwinter, the dash system, and also Guild Wars. It's a very simple, very usual dash system. So you have 3 dashes and it replenishes. Nothing unique between the different classes like what we see in Neverwinter, but it is there, and it just makes it really easy to dodge every skill shot ever. I was hoping for maybe a little bit more complicated. Like, I like how Neverwinter does it, where every class is a little bit different, and Guild Wars 2 is also a little bit more fair. This game just makes it really easy to dodge out of the way. And then, of course, compounded by the fact that monsters do drop out health orbs, and you are rewarded by attacking with increased resource regeneration. Basically, it turns into a very atrocious gameplay style. Now, mostly I did play the Berserker and the Paladin, so it's very possible that those two classes are just really focused towards that, but I also saw the same for the mages. So all in all, it's a very aggressive playstyle. You're moving a lot, you're doing a lot, and that's totally fine. However, it's just a little bit dull sometimes. You just need a little bit more challenge, and there probably is going to be that. There's probably going to be dungeons based around these different mechanics, and that's the hope. But as a first impression, it leaves me a little bit worried, and I was a little bit bored whenever, even though some of these bosses were challenging, they just kind of had big health bars, and they were actually really easy to dodge some of their skill shots. There was one boss, however, that gave me a lot of trouble, this Naga or Siren-looking serpent lady. She was actually very difficult for me, so I died a couple times on stream. It was a lot of fun, though, I have to admit. I'm a little bit fearful for the future. I think it could be great, but at the same time, its physics and everything just really aren't, it's just not that fun compared to Dragon Nest. Now, Dragon Nest, monsters do fly all over the screen. You do have huge assortment of abilities that do a ton of things, lots of CCs, lots of explosions, just really big, epic abilities, and in this game, it's really not so much. It's toned down, and mostly it's based on the combo system. So if you're familiar with fighting games or maybe even Terra, this game is actually kind of similar to Terra, where it is action combat, but really, truly, it's kind of more like a disguised pseudo-tab targeting system, where you are attacking, and kind of similar to Neverwinter, you are somewhat rooted in place. It's really more of a system of momentum. When you attack, you are carried through a course of action, where sometimes your character will move, sometimes he'll be doing all these crazy acrobatics. It's not really standstill, because you can move, and you can dash, and you can do all these crazy spectacle abilities, but once you start attacking, or once you start doing ability, you are no longer free to just move around and flop around. You can, however, use shift in order to dodge or even break animations, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of skill in that with PvP, as we see in Neverwinter as well. But for the most part, in dungeons, you really are just smacking enemies, probably going to be tanking and spanking. You are going to be dodging a little bit some of these abilities. Even when you are a paladin, you have a shield, and you do have a healer healing you. Some of these abilities are huge and big, just like we see in Terra. You are probably going to have to dodge some abilities, and make sure that you use your block abilities on the ones that you need to. So, I mean, I think the endgame could be fun. Now, PvP could be really cool with these mechanics. Now, we don't have the physics like we have in Dragon Nest, but then again, in Dragon Nest, it's really dumb. It's basically whoever has more CC or whoever can dodge the other person's CC. Dragon Nest arenas are cool and I think amazing, but they're really not that popular because it's really anti-fun because of all the CC. Now, in this game, it's a little bit different. There's not that much CC, and really, it's more, you kind of self-CC yourself whenever you attack anyways. So there's a lot of thought and strategy going into it. Should I attack now? It's going to root me in place, and then he might flank me. I might miss him. There's just a lot of strategy that I think could go into these mechanics, even though we don't have that many abilities, and really the abilities don't range too much in what they do. Maybe one swings a little bit wider, maybe one makes you dash a little bit further. Overall, the abilities aren't too wide of an assortment, but we do have some abilities that the way they interact with others, because of the combo system, and because they might break animations, they might move, because some do actually move you, there's just a lot of mechanic. And if you are familiar with MOBA mechanics, base MOBA model is very immobile, but depending on how good you are with these mechanics and these different abilities, you can actually move and become very mobile. So basically, whoever is the most mobile, whoever has the most actions per minute, whoever can own the mechanics of their character the best is going to be the winner, and that's what's really fun about it. So when we come into the PvP for Skyforge, that makes me really excited. But at the same time, for PvE, I'm a little bit hesitant for it, but it could be great at the same time. Now, this first impression might have seemed a little bit negative, but overall, I am still very excited for the game. I still think its premise is interesting and unique, and even though its aesthetic isn't entirely new, it is just, for a free-to-play, it looks really good. A huge amount of polish, guys. Oh yeah, the menus look nice. All the gameplay is really intuitive, to be honest. All the gameplay, the questing, upgrading equipment, all that stuff, everything is just really intuitive, but at the same time, it's a little bit simple. It's a little bit simplistic. Like I said, some of these maps are just really simple. Some of these areas, the equipment you get as well. It's not like you're going to get a ton of different swords with lots of different stats. It's really simple. Now, I just said that you're not going to get lots of different weapons with lots of different stats. But one thing that I did notice is that even though you don't have a lot of slots for equipment, you do have a lot of stats on your character. You have things like Valor, Luck, all sorts of weird statistic names that I'm not used to at all. Normally I'm like strength, dexterity maybe, intelligence. You get a lot of weird things on this, and they all attribute to different kind of play styles. You could probably spec your character to be more luck-based, which means crit damage, or maybe you want to just be bonus damage, because there's a difference between bonus damage and crit damage, and all these little tiny differences can probably play into the end game for certain bosses, for certain builds. A lot of customization seems like it could go into the game, but so far I haven't felt that as a first impression. But I am hopeful, and hey, hopefully you guys are hopeful as well. Yeah, well anyways, I'm Skyforge Shore with Attack Gaming, and I am having fun with Skyforge. I will be doing more videos on this. I am going to be playing it, and if you are interested in seeing that, well, give us a like and subscribe if you will, and then we'll make sure to see you back here again soon. Thanks for watching. See you guys later.
Do you like here in Halo 1? Halo CE. The best Halo, as I like to call it. The most intuitive Halo.
I did not know this before the Master Chief Collection. I fucking hate Halo 1 with a living passion. What a bad fucking game. I mean, you play half the game, it's new levels. The second half of the game... Oh.
That was the loudest sound we ever recorded on this show.
Oh, I see it.
You broke it.